24시간 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Coming up on Arirang News, President Yoon in addressing the UN General Assembly stresses that any sort of military deal between Russia and North Korea would be a direct provocation not only against Ukraine but also South Korea. And he'll also deliver a speech at New York University on establishing global digital order. The National Assembly passes a motion seeking the arrest of opposition leader Lee Jae-myung, who's accused of bribery and corruption. And for the first time in Korea's history, it also passes another motion for the dismissal of Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, holding him accountable for recent controversies. The U.S. Federal Reserve is keeping its key interest rates steady. But with the Fed also signaling another rate hike this year, eyes are on how this will affect the Bank of Korea's rate decision. Good evening, it's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with President Yoon Suk-yeol's speech at New York University in the coming hours. President Yoon will reiterate his call for global principles and an international body on the ethical and sustainable use of technology. On the fourth day of his trip to New York City, the South Korean leader will attend the Digital Vision Forum, which was first held last year. Yoon attended then too and stressed the need for equitable access to digital data to create economic and social values. Since then, Yoon has called for universal digital principles on a number of occasions, including at the World Economic Forum earlier this year and at Sorbonne University, where he declared the so-called Paris Initiative to create a global order for technological advancement. Ahead of the event, during his speech at the United Nations General Assembly on Wednesday, Yoon said Seoul plans to introduce a digital Bill of Rights and host a global AI forum to address pertinent issues. And during President Yoon's speech addressing the United Nations General Assembly, he issued a strong message saying should Russia and North Korea engage in arms deal assisting the war in Ukraine, it would also be a direct provocation against South Korea as well. He stressed that in such a scenario, Seoul, together with its allies and partners, would not stand by idly. Our Oh Soo-young reports from New York.
President Yoon Suk-yeol says a reform may be due for the United Nations' most powerful body on global security, expressing Seoul's firmest stance yet against Russia's potential arms cooperation with North Korea and its ongoing invasion of Ukraine. In his speech to the United Nations General Assembly on Wednesday, Yoon said if Pyongyang acquires the information and technology needed to enhance its weapons of mass destruction in exchange for supplying Moscow with conventional weapons, this would amount to a direct provocation threatening the peace and security of both Ukraine and South Korea.
세계 평화의 최종적 수호자여야 할 UN 안보리 상임이사국이 다른 주권 국가를 무력 침공해 전쟁을 일으키고 전쟁 수행에 필요한 무기와 군수품을 안보리 결의를 정면으로 위반하는 정권으로부터 지원받는 현실은 자기 모순적입니다.
He said Seoul, its allies and its partners will not stand idly by. A presidential official told reporters there could be various economic, diplomatic and military pressure points to block Russia and North Korea from substantial arms cooperation. Yoon further said the call to reform the Security Council would receive broad support. The Security Council's 5 permanent members include Russia and China, with both countries critically hindering collective action with their veto powers. The idea of expanding the representation of non-permanent member countries or removing the right to veto has been gaining currency, with the leaders of the United States, Japan, Ukraine and the European Union endorsing the move in their own General Assembly speeches this year. A Yoon official said the president was pointing out how the Security Council's gridlock has directly affected South Korea's security and the impact of the Ukraine war to spur worldwide crises in food, energy and economic security. As a non-permanent member of the United Nations for a 2-year term beginning next year, Yoon expressed his intention to take a responsible and principled role in international peace and security.
The Camp David security cooperation system between South Korea, the US and Japan will be in active operation, dealing with international security issues such as the North Korean nuclear issue and the Ukraine war.
Furthermore, Yoon reiterated his pledge to roll out comprehensive support for Ukraine under Seoul's Ukraine Peace and Solidarity Initiative, and development assistance of around $2.3 billion in long-term low-interest loans for reconstruction projects. President Yoon said going forward, world leaders share the responsibility of passing on to future generations an international order grounded in justice and the rule of law for freedom, peace and prosperity. He said South Korea, together with the UN, will readily take on this responsibility. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, New York.
Beyond security issues, President Yoon also lays out South Korea's plans to play a leading role in narrowing the global divides on the development, climate, and digital fronts. He also promoted Busan's bid to host the World Expo in 2030. Our Kim Do-yeon covers his remarks.
President Yoon Suk-yeol at the podium of the UN General Assembly on Wednesday said the word division 13 times during his 15-minute speech. The frequency of the use of the word highlights President Yoon's ambition to make South Korea a global contributor, helping developing economies close the gap with other nations.
오늘날 전례 없는 글로벌 복합 위기 속에서 안보는 물론 경제, 기술, 보건, 환경, 문화 등 모든 분야에 걸쳐 국가 간 격차가 커지고 있습니다.
According to President Yoon, South Korea will tackle 3 specific divisions: infrastructure development, the impact of climate change, and digital capabilities. The developmental gap refers to countries that lack essential infrastructure for living, such as clean water and sanitation systems. To achieve this, South Korea will raise its official development assistance budget by 40% in 2024. To address the climate change gap, South Korea will scale up its Green ODA to assist countries vulnerable to climate change and has promised $300 million to the Green Climate Fund. It's also seeking to set up the Carbonfree alliance with nations that are willing to promote the adoption of carbon-free energy. In terms of digital divide, which President Yoon called a major cause of economic division between nations, South Korea will actively support digital transformation for lower-income economies. In addition, it will be a leader in the establishment of an international organization under the UN to discuss and set forth rules regarding digital ethics.
The proactive commitment to actively engage in solving issues in the global south demonstrates a fundamental shift in South Korea's foreign policy and diplomacy since President Yoon took office. Efforts to bridge the gap will be tailored to each partner country, resulting in tangible outcomes.
The president wrapped up his speech with another push for Busan's World Expo 2030 bid, tying it together with the nation's motivation to step up as a globally contributing nation.
대한민국은 이제 유라시아 대륙과 태평양을 연결하는 관문인 부산에서 2030년 엑스포를 개최함으로써 글로벌 책임 국가의 역할을 적극 수행하고자 합니다.
He added that the Busan Expo will serve as a platform to spread freedom in the spirit of solidarity, through which the world's citizens can overcome crises and challenges together. 1 year ago, President Yoon emphasized freedom and solidarity here at the UN. And since then, he has fostered stronger relations with like-minded nations. Now, for this year, as he commits to bridging the mentioned divisions, he has set out measures to put his vision into even more practical actions. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News, New York.
And with regards to climate change, President Yoon has also proposed a carbon-free alliance. Our Choi Soo-young tells us what this means.
President Yoon Suk-yeol, in his UN speech in New York on September 20th, introduced the Carbon-Free Alliance, a global initiative promoting clean energy and reducing climate disparities between nations. According to South Korea's Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy, concerns have arisen over international agreements led by advanced countries such as the Renewable Energy 100% initiative. RE100 is an initiative where many of the world's biggest companies have signed up to use 100% renewable energy by 2050. It's claimed that such agreements focus solely on renewable energy, neglecting diverse energy patterns such as nuclear or hydrogen power in different regions. The ministry said some companies in countries like South Korea with limited renewable energy sources see this as a trade barrier due to higher costs. Expanding carbon-free energy like nuclear power and hydrogen globally is challenging with only private efforts, as countries having varying systems and standards. President Yoon stated that the Carbon-Free Alliance will be an open platform where businesses, governments, and international organizations from around the world can participate, aiming to address these challenges.
대한민국은 탄소 중립 목표 달성을 앞당기기 위한 현실적인 대안으로 재생에너지뿐만 아니라 원전, 수소와 같은 고효율 무탄소 에너지를 폭넓게 활용할 것이며 이를 기후위기 취약국들과 공유함으로써 그들에게 이 혜택이 돌아가게 할 것입니다.
President Yoon's carbon-free energy proposal focuses on setting minimum emission standards for greenhouse gases and electricity production and using all kinds of carbon-free energy sources instead of only endorsing certain energy sources. The ministry added that the missions of the CEF Alliance include offering technical consulting for private sector innovation, establishing global standards for efficient carbon-free energy supply chains, providing a specialized workforce, and giving support to reduce climate disparities between advanced and developing nations. South Korea plans to collaborate with countries such as the US, Japan, France, and the UK, sharing similar industrial structures to promote the global shift to carbon-free energy. The South Korean government is committed to actively supporting a worldwide CEF alliance and boosting Korea's competitiveness in this sector. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
And the president also remains committed to boosting South Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of this latest UN summit. As part of such intentions, a meeting with Switzerland marked the 60th anniversary of diplomatic relations, while separate summit talks with the Central African Republic and Kyrgyzstan touched upon agriculture and healthcare. Also on the margins of the UN meeting, Korea and Israel agreed to bolster partnership in advanced technologies, while Korea and Hungary addressed low birth rates. Following a rare summit between the leaders of North Korea and Russia, South Korea has imposed new sanctions on the North. These include ones against high-level North Korean officials such as Kang Sun-nam, who was seen accompanying Kim Jong-un on his trip to Russia last week. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji has more.
Amid concerns about military cooperation between North Korea and Russia, South Korea has imposed unilateral sanctions on Pyongyang. The foreign ministry said they target those linked to arms deals with other countries, including Russia, or ones involved in the North's nuclear missile development programs. Newly added to an existing sanctions list are 10 individuals and 2 institutions. Among them, South Korea is the first in the world to issue sanctions on Slovakian company Glocom and 7 North Koreans. The latter include 3 high-level officials: the regime's defense minister Kang Sun-nam, a former head of the North Korean People's Army General Staff Park Soo-il, and senior secretary of the Academy of Defense Science Lee Sung-hak. Also named on the sanctions list were Lee Chang-min, Kim Myung-jin, and Lee Hyuk-chul, all involved in overseas weapons trading, including with Moscow. Announcing the measures, the foreign ministry said this was part of the government's efforts to firmly respond to North Korea's illicit activities, especially those that pose a serious threat to peace and prosperity on the Korean peninsula, as well as the international community. This marks the country's 12th unilateral sanctions measure against the North since President Yoon Suk-yeol took office in May last year. So far, a total of 64 individuals and 53 agencies have been put on the sanctions list. The move comes after the vice foreign minister hinted at the possibility of unilateral sanctions during a National Assembly session earlier in the day.
We could cooperate with like-minded countries in the West, such as the United States, EU, or Japan. And we can, of course, issue our own unilateral sanctions.
Separately, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Washington is taking action to try to disrupt any potential arms deal, and stressed it was trying to break that up wherever we can. Speaking in an interview with broadcaster NBC on Wednesday local time, the top American diplomat added that the summit between Pyongyang and Moscow last week showed a certain amount of desperation from Russia due to the prolonged war in Ukraine. Noting that Putin did not attend either the UN General Assembly in New York or the recent G20 summit, Blinken said the only thing Russia had left was to go to regimes such as North Korea and Iran to try to get what it needs. 배은지, Arirang News.
At the National Assembly, the voting took place for two separate motions. One seeking the arrest of main opposition Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung, and the other for the dismissal of Prime Minister Han Duck-soo. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo reports.
On Thursday, the National Assembly passed a motion for the arrest of Lee Jae-myung with 149 approvals, 136 disapprovals, 6 abstentions, and 4 invalids. And for the first time in history, the opposition-led motion to propose to the president the dismissal of the prime minister passed with 175 approvals, 116 disapprovals, and 4 abstentions. The number of total registered lawmakers is 298. Of them, 295 were present to vote. The prosecution sought an arrest warrant for Lee on allegations of breach of trust and third-party bribery, among others. Lee is accused of giving special developmental favors to a private contractor during the construction of apartment complexes in the Baekhyun-dong neighborhood of Seongnam City back in 2014 and 2015 while serving as the city's mayor.
Some public officials of Seongnam City disapproved of the plan as it didn't follow clearly defined existing rules, but they were ignored due to the will of Mayor Lee Jae-myung.
They also suspect that Lee has been involved in the unlawful transfer of money to North Korea, something which he and the opposition are denying.
Numerous allegations were raised, but no crimes were proven to have been committed.
By law, sitting lawmakers are immune from arrest while the assembly is in session. For them to be arrested, the assembly must consent to it. And over half of registered lawmakers must be present for voting. Of those, the majority must vote in favor. The proposal for the dismissal of the prime minister was pushed by the opposition, blaming him for what they call insufficient prevention and countermeasures for the Itaewon crowd crush, the World Scout Jamboree, and the discharge of wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear power plant. The anonymous vote required majority approvals from all registered lawmakers to pass. The approval is not binding, and it's expected that the president will choose not to dismiss the prime minister, making the decision more politically symbolic. The ruling People Power Party denounced the proposal, calling it a stain on constitutional history. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
The U.S. Federal Reserve is keeping its key interest rate steady within the 5.25% to 5.5% range. But with the Fed also signaling another rate hike this year, eyes are on how this will affect the Bank of Korea's rate decision down the road. Our Park Gun-woo has details.
The interest rate gap between South Korea and the U.S. remains unchanged following the U.S. Fed's latest decision to freeze interest rates for the second time this year. After a 2-day Federal Open Market Committee meeting, the U.S. Fed on Wednesday decided to freeze its key interest rates in the 5.25% to 5.5% range. South Korea's central bank kept its rate at 3.5% in August, meaning the gap between the two countries will stay in the 1.75 to 2 percentage points range, at least until authorities make their next announcement on interest rates on October 19th. Speaking at a press conference, Fed Chair Jerome Powell said the latest decision to freeze rates is in line with its goals of achieving maximum employment and dampening inflation to 2% over the long run. And he hinted at the likelihood of additional rate hikes down the road. South Korea's Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho in a meeting on Thursday focused on Mr. Powell's remarks about the possibility of interest hikes.
Following the Fed's decision, it seems that there is a high possibility that high interest rates will remain longer, along with increased volatility in the global financial markets. The government and Bank of Korea will be on high alert to address the situation.
The Bank of Korea also said future rate hikes by the Fed are possible. The Bank of Korea's Vice President Yoo Sang-dae said the bank will monitor how these monetary policies will affect the financial market for both Korea and globally. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
South Korea's exports during the first 20 days of this month rose slightly for the first time in 3 months. But exports of chips and outbound shipments to China remain sluggish. Data from the Korea Customs Service on Thursday shows that the value of exports rose 9.8% compared to the previous year to $35.9 billion US. This is the first time since June that exports rose during the first 20 days of the month. Officials, however, said that this was mostly due to the higher number of working days compared to the same period the year before. Exports of chips, the nation's key export item, dropped by just over 14% from a year earlier. By destination, exports to South Korea's biggest trading partner, China, fell 9% on year. Accordingly, Korea's trade deficit stands at $24.2 billion so far this year. Shifting gears, despite high living costs, the younger generation in South Korea are taking steps to upgrade their lifestyle. Now they're choosing to spend their money on something less tangible, experience. Our Moon Hae-ryung went to find out more about what's being called Flexperience.
I'm here in central Seoul to see the latest trend of spending big money not on items but on experiences. Young people in South Korea are upgrading classic outings like movies and drinks to more premium experiences.
Fine dining is becoming increasingly popular among the younger generation, and that includes switching out cheap soju for more expensive options like whiskey. A survey conducted by market research company Trend Monitor showed that people in their 20s and 30s had a higher percentage of positive opinions on dining at a premium restaurant than those in older age brackets. And according to research company Euromonitor, growth in whiskey consumption in South Korea was the highest recorded in the world last year, jumping by nearly 46% on year. This has culminated in unique whiskey items catered to younger tastes, such as this bingski, a combination of the word bingsu, which is a Korean dessert made from shaved ice, and whiskey. The sweetness of the bingsu with locally sourced honeycomb and coffee syrup offsets the bitterness of the whiskey. And despite the high cost of 118,000 Korean won, or roughly $88 US, it's gaining popularity due to the luxurious experience it presents.
Bingski is gaining popularity and has resulted in stores in Seongsu-dong and Hannam-dong, which are often frequented by Gen Zs, specifically selling it.
Whiskey is also being repackaged and reformed in other ways for its new audience. I visited this pop-up store at the heart of Seongsu-dong, the most trendy neighborhood in Seoul. It's designed as a convenience store to make it more accessible to young people, and sells items that enable customers to experience whiskey through smell as well as taste. Scented candles made from whiskey and other ingredients are popular with the customers here, with more than 500 people visiting the store per day during the week to purchase these products.
I think whiskey and highballs are popular with Gen Zs because they feel like a more tasteful way to get drunk.
Another popular upgrade of a common activity between Gen Zs is the movies.
In a cinema like this one, the overall experience is more than just watching a movie.
At this movie theatre, there is a wide range of prestige cinemas that can be enjoyed at a price of between 4 to 5 times that of a normal ticket. You can wine and dine in the restaurant downstairs before making your way up to a cinema set with comfortable armchairs, or you can choose to eat at your seat. There's even a private box, as if you're at the opera, where you can watch a film in a secluded space with a great view.
These premium cinemas used to mostly be filled by people in their 30s and 40s, but now it's also enjoyed by a lot of people in their 20s.
So why are young people choosing to spend their money this way?
The minimalism trend among the millennial and Gen Z generations means that they don't want to buy things to keep. They now value things they can use and experience.
A quintessential part of the Flexperience is sharing and collecting information on social media platforms. And it looks as though the trend will continue to add fuel to the spending culture among youths here in South Korea. Moon Hae-ryung, Arirang News.
Now to the 19th Asian Games in Hangzhou. This morning, the Korean national team took part in a welcoming ceremony at the Asian Games Village. Around 30 Korean athletes are already in Hangzhou for training or competition, including those in gymnastics and esports gathered at the Flag Plaza, alongside athletes from Jordan, Syria, and Yemen. The event featured the raising of each country's national flag and a gift exchange between the mayor of the Asian Games Village and team representatives. South Korea is sending a record number of 1,140 athletes to the game. The opening ceremony will take place on Saturday at 8 p.m. China time.
Big fluctuation in daily temperatures will be seen for tomorrow. Most regions will see a gap of more than 10 degrees in between day and night. First, Seoul morning lows will be starting off at 16 degrees, which is about the seasonal average, but highs will be jumping significantly to 27 degrees. Dressing in layers will be highly recommended. And strong winds are in the forecast for tomorrow. For coastlines of Gyeongsang-do provinces and Jeju Island in particular, winds will be especially strong. The East Coast may even see high waves of up to 4 meters. For those fishing or boating, make sure to refer to the latest weather forecast. Morning temperatures will be 1 to 3 degrees lower than today. Seoul and Gyeongju will be starting off at 16 degrees. More sunshine will be dominating for the daytime across inland regions. Highs in Seoul and Gwangju will get up to 27. Chuncheon and Gyeongju will be topping out at 26 degrees. For the remainder of the week, highs will be hovering around 27 degrees in Seoul. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that is all for tonight's newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with the latest news. Good night.
Welcome.